Yeah, so Tiffany was asking about that. Wanted to know if I was okay. I'm fine. I'm not in those
Tiffany,
breaches,
let me
or at
tell
least
you
not
something.
yet.
Tiffany, Donna is not fine. Tiffany, come on now. You know Donna's not well.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is my co-host, Donna Grindle of Cardin Compliance. Good day, Donna.
Good day, David. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing quite well.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but it is worth saying that right after we did our podcast recording last week, the internet went out on the entire East Coast.
I know, really. I'm glad we were able to record then because, we don't sit in a studio. We both sit in our sad little offices.
Yeah, so that was interesting, and we will get on that a little bit more. But we have to got to catch up with some things. First of all, we have some listeners who have sent questions and concerns to us, and so we need to answer those. We always
we do answer the emails fairly soon after we get them. We try to answer them fairly quickly, but we don't remember always to then mention on the air that we actually are getting these questions so that we can share that with everybody, what the questions are and the answers.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, no. After you, David.
Oh, no. I insist. After you.
Well, we first have to hit on Kevin because he replied to our weekly emails that go out, and somehow that got lost in spam filter. So we did lose his for a while. We apologize to Kevin, but his question was on storing PHI on servers outside the U.S., which we did actually touch on the last episode where I talked about the HIPAA Security Conference that I'd gone to, where that was part of the discussion, and the points that they made there reiterated what our answer to Kevin was, is it's really not a good idea, but there's no law against it. The important thing they pointed out last week was that you have to know if you're going to choose to put it in another country, you're not violating any HIPAA laws there, but you are supposed to have a business associate agreement, and you're supposed to make sure they're going to secure things. And then the tricky part comes if they don't do their end, keep up their end of the bargain, you're very limited on what you can do.
Yeah. Now, I had heard one time, and tell me if they mentioned this at all, but I had heard one time that if there's going to be any enforcement around something like that, that basically they go after the closest thing they can possibly get to. So if it happens to be, the business associate that hired the company or moved the data offsite, then that's kind of who they went after. Are they still kind of saying that, or do they make any mention of that?
They didn't specifically talk about that, but you got to assume that here's what will happen is if something goes wrong and you can't recoup, you can't get your data or whatever, then they're going to say to you, did you plan for this? Did you have any contracts? Did you do anything that would protect you from this? And if you haven't, it's on you. Because that is a risk that you should identify that as a risk and then define how you're going to mitigate the risk, because that can technically be a high risk. But the important part is knowing what the laws are in the country where the data is going to go. And their point, they said there's an unnamed country that it takes 30 years to actually go to court. So we're not talking about simple things. And even if you won a judgment and got a certain amount of money, you can't take the money out of that country. So
you got a credit.
I know, really? So what are you going to do, And that is by far one of those squirrely things that you better know about before you're going to host outside the country. And so there you go, Kevin. We did mention it in your email response that it's really, do a real serious consideration before you do it. I just recommend don't do it because it gets really complicated. But if you've got to do it, then you have to get special insurance. You need to have them make a subsidiary or something so that it puts them under U.S. law, is what some of those attorneys said. Mm-hmm. So then we had Bill's question on internal IT at the hospital building apps and talking about, does that need to meet all these security rules and all these kind of things, which, it's an app that touches PHI. So yes, and we sent him some information about what app developers have to worry about. And we appreciate both Bill and Kevin's questions. They did mention that they enjoy the podcast.
Of course. I mean, yes.
And then we also got one from Tiffany, who sent in a note saying, hey, I've heard about this Dark Overlord and the Athens Orthopedic and now the Peachtree Orthopedic Clinics, which is one of the many things that we still have out there to talk about. Mm-hmm. And between those two is almost 1 million patients affected by the Dark Overlord breach in North Georgia.
Nice.
Yeah.
I wonder why he's going after somebody in North Georgia. That's personal.
Yeah.
He must live in Atlanta.
Yeah. So Tiffany was asking about that. Wanted to know if I was okay. I'm fine. I'm not in those
Tiffany,
breaches.
let me
or at least not yet.
Tiffany, Donna is not fine. Tiffany, come on now. Donna's not well. But I do like the fact that you said that you love the show.
Yes. Thank you for loving the show. And so bring in your questions and your comments and, of course, in your reviews. And we appreciate all of that because we're like monkeys working for peanuts. And I did have to share one other thing. Shout out to Danielle, who came into a meeting with me and said that she was referencing her boss. And she said, he forced me to listen to your podcast. She was all excited to tell me that she was forced to listen to the podcast and then said, but no, when I laughed, because I did. She said, but
nervous laugh.
I actually like it. I like it, even though I was forced to do it. Now I like it.
We're like broccoli and cheese.
That's right. We're the cheese that makes the broccoli enjoyable.
Oh, yeah. So very good. I'm glad Danielle was forced to listen.
Yeah. Well, she said a lot of things that at some point they're going to end up she and I are going to end up doing projects together. And I feel certain just from some of the things that she said yesterday that she's going to give me great quips to use on the podcast. So.
That's always nice.
Yeah. I always like to have things to say,
Well, before we get into the topic, do we have any other things you want to cover?
Well, just that there's so many topics that I could choose from, and these notes were done, but we still have a lot of other upcoming topics, and we don't want you to think we're missing out on these things because the HIPAA and cloud computing guidance is huge. We want to talk about that. We want to talk about the settlements with Care New England for $400,000. Again, it was one from 2012 and involved unencrypted backup tapes that were lost by a business associate without a BAA. Mm-hmm. And the $2,140,500 settlement with St. Joseph, and that involved a failure in installing a server so that the file shares were open to internet search engines for a year. So there you go. And some of the things that they made mention of there, including that several different people had come in, several different third parties had come in and done a patchwork risk assessment, risk analysis. Mm-hmm. And then, as you mentioned, the IoT broke the internet for the first time, and we don't expect it to be the last.
No. And that's one of those times where we have to say, yes, we were right. It's those 3 words I always just enjoy hearing my wife say. You were right. It's not I love you, it's you were right.
Yeah. We talked about the Internet of Things a long time ago. Rise of the Machines, I think is what I called that one. And so we'll add back to that when we're talking about it. But that, and then, of course, we did do holiday episodes last year. I'm trying to decide if I can work those out as well. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, compliance deals, as well as a gift-giving guide for your compliance officers. So we got a lot of things in the works. Just those gets us past the end of the year. So clearly, and we can't possibly start doing a podcast every day, but we have enough people
deal with
ask.
you every day.
People ask us if we have a hard time coming up with information, and we were just talking about that with people yesterday, and it's like, no, we don't. In fact, we're overwhelmed with things that we could be talking about. So,
So we're going to finish up what we started last week. I don't know how many part 2 podcasts have we ever had.
yeah, the only multiple part ones is when we went through the myths, the HIPAA myths in the beginning. And those still get a lot of downloads. We just went through the HIPAA myths that are published by HHS, but multi-parts.
Yeah, so this one we're going to, if you listened to the one last week, this is a continuation. If you didn't, go ahead and press pause. No, actually, you could probably pick up on this one and still hit the next one or the last one later. It's not going to be you're not going to miss much, but we're covering what Donna covered or it was exposed to in her
exposed
because she was infected. She was exposed to in a conference that she attended. It was luckily she was able to do a webcast and attend the conference. So there was a ton of good information that come out of that. And so we want to let her kind of regurgitate all that.
Boy, you're just full of expose, regurgitate.
Yeah, I know. It's Halloween almost. You know, as we're recording this, I mean, of course, by the time people hear it, it's closer to Thanksgiving. But,
I know. Yeah.
You know.
We do our part to keep things rolling along. So the conference, in case you didn't hear the first part, is the NIST OCR Safeguarding Healthcare there'll be a link to it. I can't remember. It's the NIST OCR Joint Conference on Safeguarding Healthcare Information. So it's really one of my favorites because, you know, you get the lawyers and the nerds talking, which is kind of interesting. But we went through almost all of it last week, but this week it was a really meaty part of, we're going to cover the last bits where it talks about the OCR audits and where they stand and what they're doing, as well as some of the settlements and what the points they made about the settlements and some common problems. And then finally, they did have an FTC speaker. And then right after the conference, we also got guidance from them on remembering that FTC and HIPAA both have to be addressed. They're not mutually exclusive. So, you ready, David?
I am ready.
As ready as you'll ever be.
Let's run down this road together.
Okay, so we have in the audits, I thought several things were interesting that I wanted to share. One was that they pointed out they are testing the desk audit concept to determine the effectiveness of using desk audits instead of all on-site audits. So they're trying to, you know, of course that's going to be a cost savings to do desk audits because you're not, you know, having to send somebody somewhere for a week or two.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to see if we can be fully effective with desk audits, which would allow them to do more desk audits.
Do more with less.
Yeah, that's right. But they made several points about all the things that they were looking at. They have the 167 desk audits. They're still in review. So if you see advertising that somebody has passed their audit, it's kind of hard to that have actually happened. I'm just saying.
Oh, so you've seen that.
Yeah, I have seen that. We passed our audit.
Yeah. Maybe we should do an episode of HIPAA bullcrap.
I know. Well, you know, there's marketing people, and marketing people just don't get it. Somebody somewhere may have said, look, we were able to supply all the information they asked for from OCR. Now, that is your opinion. That is not OCR's opinion. And you may very well have passed with flying colors. Not arguing that you may have done that. What I'm arguing about is they haven't actually given their final response out to those 167 audits that they did of covered entities. So they did make a few points about those as well. That a very interesting number out of those 167 CEs, you know, the one thing that they talked about, and we talked about when we discussed the desk audits and how they had it structured, You had to give your list of business associates.
Yeah, bunches.
They got 20,000 business associates listed just from 167 Cs. 20,000. So that is a clear indicator of exactly how many business associates are out there, and nobody knows that they are. Yeah. Now, I know in some cases, people are going to be listed as business associates, and it'll be determined that they are not because people just go nuts. You know,
give it to everybody. Everybody's a business associate.
Yeah, everybody's a BA. You're a BA. You're a BA.
So you're a Dr. Pepper. He's a Dr. Pepper.
So clearly, there's plenty of them to choose from for the audits, and it was officially announced that the BA audits, which they had said before were going to begin in October, the official announcement popped up on Devin McGraw's slide. She goes, we'll tell you for sure the date. We're not going to do that. And the slide comes up. She goes, well, I guess we will because the slide says November. So my team is saying that we're going to announce this. So if you're a business associate, don't be surprised if you get a notification, particularly if you're one of the 20,000, and they have others that they know of. I mean, of course, they know that the EHR vendors are business associates, especially the cloud ones. And so they already have a lot of those in there, but 20,000 different business associates could potentially be audited. Now, they're only going to get, statistically, it's very low. They're probably only going to do less than 50. Mm-hmm. I think by the time it's said and done, including the CEs, the BAs, and the on-site audits, they're only going to get around 250. So there's only 80, a little over 80 that they haven't done of those yet. So it's a really tiny. So if you consider yourself lucky enough to go buy a lottery ticket, if you get picked for the BA audits, is all I'm saying. They did point out that the BA audits are going to cover the security rule and the breach response planning so that you are showing that you are prepared to respond quickly is what it said. But then they're like, you don't have to do everything because the CE is ultimately responsible, but you do have to know what you're going to do. I just tell everybody, look, the CEs can turn around and ask you to do the response and be responsible for sending all of the notifications. They can ask you to do all kinds of things. And a lot of the BAAs now are saying, hey, you're going to be indemnified and you're going to take over this responsibility. So you might as well just start doing that. Build your breach response plan, know what you're supposed to be doing. So I just recommend you go ahead and do it. It's not a bad thing to do, to have an incident response plan that's actually written down and people know what to do.
Right.
The on-site audits are due to start early 2017 is all they would say. And if you are a BA, all of that audit information, which there's a link to, the webinar information and all of that on our previous podcast on this. So if you're a BA and you want to know what it'll be like, it's the same as what we gave you on the CE, where you have X amount of time to 10 business days to turn around all this stuff and, don't overdo it. Don't try to baffle us with stuff, We're only going to evaluate what we ask for, even if you give us more. We're not going to give you credit for the other stuff. Oh, I don't have a risk analysis, but I do have these 5,000 other things. How about you look at those? No. They're saying, look, we want to know that things we ask for, you have. Don't try to show us other things if you don't have those. Just tell us why you don't have those. Doing something is better than nothing. They reiterated that multiple times. And I did love the quote from Devin McGraw. I am not looking to air your less than clean white laundry. And another thing is, once the audit information comes out, they did make a point, and this gets back to being a nerd again, that the way they selected who is going to be in these audits will not count as a true statistical sample of the industry. So when the results come out, all you'll know is of these people that were actually audited, these are the findings. That is not an indicator of the industry as a whole because they didn't do a statistical sample. It's not like that at all. So we'll have to watch for that and go back to that when, it'll be like people saying, we passed. It'll be like, all people, because of the audits, we know that all of the people in healthcare are doing this. And no.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the stuff on the audits. You got any questions, David?
Not so far. No. I mean, I think it's worth saying that we always say doing something is better than doing nothing.
Right.
We say a lot. I mean, so to hear them say it is comforting and also proves they do still listen to the podcast. But I think it's worth also saying that if you are a business associate, you probably should be making sure that if your covered entity gets any kind of letter or something to the effect of a review or an audit, maybe you should get notified about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was another question is, the covered entities asked, should we tell our business associates that we've gotten these? And OCR answered in their webinar, no.
Don't tell them we're coming.
Yeah, listen, that gives them a head start, and they might do it just because we're coming and not because they actually mean to do it and maintain it. So they really want it to be a surprise, random audit.
Okay, then.
So on to the discussion of settlements, because we again have talked about that they have been more active this year than ever before. They've done as many settlements because they've done 2 more since our last discussion about settlements, which is, again, one of those things that we need to talk about because we say, hey, the details in the settlements are how you should know things. That's what you should be looking at, not the fines, not the dollar amounts. You should be looking at the information. Mm-hmm. We say that all the time. I was thrilled when Jocelyn Samuels, the director of OCR, said that exact same thing.
Imagine that.
I know. But they did take us into a lot of details on, how they look at the investigations when they're doing these. They also reiterated over and over that the settlement is not a fine. Don't call it a fine. It's a settlement because we could fine you a lot more. So if you see a big settlement, then that means the fine could have been massive. And we've said that over and over as well. And the point was, and I couldn't believe when she said it, it was kind of funny. They said, we settle with you because we want to leave some money there for you to fix things.
$10 ain't going to do much. You might as well take it too.
And they do say that they have not been able to get settlement money in all cases. The big scary one, the first one that went to a full fine was Signet. There's only been 2, and Signet went bankrupt, never paid a dime.
Wow.
But they did mention, and they implied it in multiple ways, and everybody's talking about the fact that they said more fines may be coming, though. So that means that you wouldn't settle, and you want to take it to an administrative law judge to have it evaluated on whether or not they have the right to fine you. Now, they did make some very serious points. That's back to that icy stare. Do not ignore us. And it got my attention because there was a pregnant pause after the do not ignore us. That was the whole room was like, I wouldn't ignore you anyway, personally, but apparently if you ignore them, they are really angry about it. And somebody must have been ignoring them lately because they were very clear and very adamant that you shouldn't be ignoring us. It's kind of like ignoring the police when they say stop.
Was this coming from the lady you said that was kind of scary?
Yeah. Well, multiple ones said it, but the one I will never forget is the one that was really scary. And she's really cool. I'd like to hang out with her. But the bigger point, if you're not going to ignore them, which is always what we recommend, don't ignore them. And they're clearly saying it as well. They said, know a few things that we're always going to ask you for a security risk assessment. So the things that we say over and over, you need to have a real risk assessment. They'd never do an investigation where they're not going to ask for it. Doesn't matter what it is. So they made that point pretty clear. It would be very, very rare for them to do an investigation of anything and not ask for one.
Right.
So,
which is step one anyway.
yeah. Well, I've had people say, well, that's not a security rule failure. That's a privacy rule failure. So they're not going to ask us about the security rule. We don't have to worry about not having a risk analysis. Yeah, no. They're saying it doesn't matter what it is, they're going to ask you for a risk analysis. And I've seen them do that. So I'm pretty sure that's the way to do it. But then they took us through common problems that they see in the investigations. And under that, the common problems that were found, it reminded me of a blog article I did all the way back in February 2014 when they were just starting to really get a lot of these settlements announced. And I know that you're dying to sing it, David. But in that article, I pointed out that I nominated the Herman Hermit song, Henry VIII, as the theme song for OCR settlement announcements, mostly because of, they say it all the time, second verse, same as the first. So it's in a loop. And we're still in the same loop because all of the same problems keep showing up over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Risk analysis issues.
The fact that you don't have one.
Yeah. We're number one. First of all, I don't do one at all. That's a problem. Or I did one 5 years ago, but I haven't done one since then. Mm-hmm. Or 3 years ago, and I haven't done one since then. You know your business has changed. You know you need to evaluate things more often than once every 3 to 5 years, or even more than 5 years if you haven't done one. Or you do one and you list things, but you don't fix anything. So you just you do it because you're supposed to do it, and the same things show up on your list every year. There's no changes or progress. Or you do one and you make a plan to fix it, but the plan's like 10 years long. So not very helpful there either. You know, your plans need to not be 10 years long. That's just not going to happen. So all of those things are, the very general levels. And then they say, all right, they'll leave out an entire department in your risk analysis. So you need to be looking at everything. They'll leave out an entire wing of a facility in their analysis. They skip mobile devices. They don't even talk about mobile devices. They don't identify the location of PHI in their offices. So they don't even acknowledge PHI is happening somewhere because they never asked for where are we getting PHI. They also stressed multiple times by multiple people, a meaningful use assessment does not qualify as a HIPAA risk analysis.
We've said that many times as well.
Yeah. Well, and the number of times people will call us and they'll just ask for a meaningful use assessment. And we're like, I'm at the point, I don't even do them. Mm-hmm. I in some cases I would do them, just that piece, but it'd be very specific scenarios. But if you're just calling me out of the blue and that's what you want, I end up telling them, because when we do our quote of all the things we're going to cover, I end up telling them, if you're looking for just to be able to check that box, we're not your people.
Right.
I'm really not. Our business is to help you protect patient information as well as protect your employees and your business.
Right.
That's what we're in business for, is to help you and to give you the guidance and the tools and all of those kind of things and the answers when you need them. But, I'm not saying I'm going to lock you in either like some vendors do. We just talked about that. But that's me and you, David. If you don't want my help, you don't have to have it. So anyway, it's also not just a gap analysis of the security rule policies. It's not like you go through the policies and say, oh, we're missing some policies on this. Let's make some policies. That is not a proper risk analysis. And a lot of people do that. And it's not just doing a whole lot of little assessments along the way. You need to have the big one and then a bunch of little ones, but not just the big one and no little ones.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean, David?
That means you better be doing the big ones and the little ones.
Oh, God.
But yeah, anytime something changes, like for instance, the $2.14 million settlement we just mentioned earlier, they put a new server in, and part of the problem was there was never an analysis of implementing that new server.
Right.
And so there's a little one.
Mm-hmm. That's a little one you should do. I was just last week sitting down scheduling meetings with one of our clients who's converting to a new EHR in 2017. And we're sitting down now. They're still finalizing all of the implementation with the new EHR vendor. And that EHR vendor isn't doing the risk analysis for you. And their IT vendor can do some risk analysis, but they're not going to worry about what you're doing to train your staff and physical security you might put in place dealing with the old system. So we come in and put them all together, which is the point that was also in that St. Joe settlement, that they had multiple vendors, multiple contractors, and then no one ever did a comprehensive to make sure. It was just a whole bunch of patchwork. So it was just a bunch of the little ones.
Right. Yeah. And we see that a lot.
And not one person can sit in a room and do a risk analysis by themselves. It's just not going to happen. You've got to get out and see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They also made the point, if you don't understand the security rule, if you don't have a good understanding of the security rule and what it all means, you can't do a risk analysis. You need someone who understands it to help you.
Right.
And understand it doesn't mean, I understand what password rules are. And I understand what this is. And I understand what this is. It means understand the security rule, not the technology, but the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. That's the risk analysis. And all of those things we probably talked about a million times. I liked some of the quotes that they used and some of the points that they got across because we may have not said them as clearly as they made that point. But here it is. It's the same stuff again. That's the same problem that was in 2014 is the risk analysis issues. So it hasn't drastically changed. Now, again, a lot of these settlements are still relating back to 2011, 2012 issues. So hopefully there are better, but the fact that it's so widespread and you and I are still seeing that that's not being done. So I'm not feeling very good about it.
Yeah. So what are we going to do to make it change?
Yeah. So here are some other problems. Lack of audits. And I thought of our friends at Sphere. Shout out to them. When they pointed out that you should notice if Susie is accessing thousands of records from an IP address in Russia or at a time of day when she shouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't look at the activity, it could be going on for years and you need to be aware of it. And so you may be logging all of this stuff, but if nobody's looking, it could be a boiler about to explode underneath your business.
Yeah. And that's not easy to do. And that's why, tools like Sphere are so good at helping you with that, because you got so much event log information going out of any machine, especially the bigger hospitals and stuff like that. There's no way you're going to catch that unless you've got something else that's helping you with that.
Well, and if it's anybody accessing patient records that will, if you make it through, you hack into the VPN and then you hack into, you hack your way in and then you get to the EHR, then those audits are the ones that are going to tell you that somebody was actually looking at the data.
Mm-hmm.
The dark overlord was logged in looking at the data.
Right.
From a server. So that would have said, why is that person all of a sudden on this IP? But it's those kinds of things. And so I kind of see those things are becoming, in my mind anyway, especially if you can do something with artificial intelligence and that kind of stuff, those things are going to be your final wall of the layered defenses.
Right.
So you got to have those.
Maybe they'll do something around machine learning in the near future that'll help with that as well.
Well, that's basically the approach that Sphere has is it's not rules-based. And I was just reading an article that was talking about if you have rules-based and it doesn't meet the rules, then, it's not going to show you. So it has to have some context to it. It has to know it can't be just instantaneous because it might take knowing multiple things, like how many patients did Susie access,
Right.
So it needs to be within context, not just whether or not it passed the rule. That's like the new password strength editors that look at way more than just how many letters and numbers and special characters. It's actually comparing it to the dictionary and all these other things. And I turned it on just to see how it worked, and it really caused us some problems because we had clients that are like, this password, I'm trying to, we were giving them ways to check stuff, and this password makes it through our EHR, but it won't pass our password test.
Right.
I had to back it off. So anyway, we move on. There's audits, though. You're not auditing to make sure things are actually being done and that policies are being followed and that you don't have somebody, an advanced persistent threat. That means somebody's in the network hiding and doing whatever they want to do for a period of time undetected. So then we move on. No patches.
This one kind of shocks me.
Why?
Because it's not difficult to do. Of a lot of the things that are on this list, I mean, some of them are time consuming or require special tools or knowledge or whatever, but patching is not that difficult.
Well, it is when you get to the medical devices.
Well, yeah, with that
that's an issue, but otherwise, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You're right.
It just shouldn't be that hard. At least to do something.
Do something. Yeah. I mean, and one of the problems, that we have is the vendors aren't making it easy for people to do that. Where we have a vendor that says, you know what, if I update to this version of Windows 10, my EHR won't work anymore.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. So, to me, the vendors have to stay on top of this just as much as anybody else. Because I end up with my hands tied recommending patching sometimes because this machine can't be patched. So if you can't patch it for whatever way, whatever reason, whether it's the medical device or whatever, if you can't do the patch, then you have to come up with some other way to protect that machine.
Right.
Or to at least audit for problems that might be using those unpatched stuff. So anyway, patches, devices, OS, apps, all of those things, that's some of the problems that they're finding. And even if you say you are patching, because we run into this too, can you show me that you are? Have you checked? That reference audits. And there are automated ways to do these things. There are ways to do it. Automated with tools, we're able to do it, but, it can be done. Don't let somebody tell you can't. Insider controls or insider issues, again, another topic we're quite familiar with. It says that you need to screen them. One of the other problems, they're not screening them. They're not terminating their access immediately.
Yeah.
Or they're not limiting access to only the information you need to be able to see. And if you can't do that, then you really need to be doing the sphere kind of audits.
Yeah. And don't call your IT guy and say, oh, can you take Susie off the server? We fired her a month ago.
Yeah. You should have a termination checklist that gets implemented immediately to remove access to all important information. That we fired him a month ago. It's like, what?
Yeah.
In the meantime.
It's interesting that I see she just logged in last week.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? That's Brenda. She uses her.
Yeah, she uses her username and password. Oh, gosh. Don't even get me started.
Yeah. There you go. And then we've got improper disposal of paper and end-of-life devices. So I'm going to get rid of this mobile device, medical device, desktop computer, laptop computer, tablet, whatever. I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm not going to clean it.
I'm going to take it to Goodwill and just donate it.
That's right. Get rid of it.
Well, you remember we saw that was the copy machines that that companies were taking back on lease, and they found a bunch of PHI on like a lot of them.
Yeah. That was the CBS News report. And that was another one. It's a long time ago. It's like 60 Minutes or something. Long time ago. But guess what? I bet you it's still happening today.
At a rate, I am.
So disposing of your devices, you need to have a plan on how paper gets disposed of. And again, with that kind of stuff, make sure that the shredding company, because we did talk about the end of December, it's been almost a year now in Fort Myers where
as it went out on the roadway.
Yeah, and stuff's flying out the road, and the staff from the office, the provider's office, had to walk up and down that roadway multiple times picking up trash. and they felt like they recovered most of it, but who knows? It could have ended up on somebody's windshield. Just bam, there's an X-ray, right there in your face. You don't know what happened. So anyway, you got that problem, and then insufficient disaster recovery business continuity, which, we've been trying to talk more about disaster recovery business continuity, and they'll say we end up with ones that only cover cyber. Mm-hmm. They don't cover anything else, or they only cover floods and that kind of stuff in a fire, but they don't cover everything. Or they only cover, even worse, backup and restore.
Right. Yep.
So those were all of the things. And the reason that we have the second verse, same as the first, it does make things a little easier for us because we can just keep talking about the same things, I suppose. And then the final thing goes, the OCR, they had an FTC representative there speaking at the conference as well. And then that guidance that came out, and the point of the guidance is HIPAA doesn't mean you're not responsible for the same rules as all other businesses for the fair standards, the FTC Act. So you need to do more than just the requirements for a HIPAA compliant authorization. Your business must consider all of your statements to consumers to make sure that taken together, they don't create a deceptive or misleading impression. So you give them your NPP that says you're going to do all this stuff, and then you give them the access to things that you shouldn't be doing. Hello, misleading. Anyway, but they're pointing that out. And I think that you're going to start seeing where people can hedge on the HIPAA thing, then it'll fall under FTC as deceptive or misleading that you're saying you're doing things and you're not.
Oh, man, that means they'll get rid of the whole HIPAA certified and HIPAA made easy. And
I hadn't thought about it that way. Good point, David.
Yeah, because I'm so sick of seeing it.
No, really? All right. So I'm done now.
You're done.
I'm done.
You're toast.
I'm done. I'm just exhausted from that.
All right. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks for listening. Appreciate the emails to the ones who sent them in. Kevin, sorry Donna lost your email for a little bit, but she found it. Don't forget to review us on iTunes, share us out on your favorite social media. And there again, we also appreciate the ones that continue to do that week in and week out. You can find us on the web at helpmewithhipaa.com and send us a question. We proved we will feature it on a future podcast at some point.
And if you're interested in sponsoring our tiny little podcast, please let us know.
Let us know.
We're starting to grow enough now that we can even start, telling people about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We can do it.
Yay!
All right. Very good. So for Donna and myself, remember, HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me With HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.